Life has a way of painting an illusion, a picture-perfect mirage that shields us from the reality lurking beneath. For Daniel, that illusion was his seemingly perfect life. He had a loving wife, Lily, a fulfilling career, and a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Each day began with a comforting routine, the hum of the coffee machine, the scent of freshly brewed espresso filling the air, and the gentle rustle of newspapers as he scanned the headlines. His mornings were his sanctuary, a peaceful interlude before the chaos of the day. That morning would be different. That morning would shatter the illusion he had come to cherish. The day began like any other. Daniel poured his coffee and set the table for one, a habit he'd developed as Lily often rushed out early for work. He glanced at the photo on the mantelpiece, a snapshot of their wedding day. Lily's smile beamed back at him, radiating warmth and joy. He smiled back, a reflex born from years of routine affection. But beneath the surface of that smile, a faint shadow lingered, a feeling he couldn't quite place. It wasn't suspicion, not yet, just a whisper of unease that he quickly dismissed. The knock at the door was unexpected, cutting through the quiet morning like a knife. Daniel hesitated for a moment, coffee mug in hand, before setting it down and walking toward the door. As he opened it, he was met with the sight of a woman, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed from what seemed like hours of crying. She looked out of place, standing on his porch with a mix of determination and vulnerability. I... I'm sorry to bother you, she began, her voice trembling. My name is Rachel. Can we talk? Daniel blinked, taken aback. Do I know you? He asked cautiously. Rachel shook her head. No, but I know your wife. She hesitated, her lips quivering as if forming the words took immense effort. And I think you need to hear what I have to say. The air grew heavy with an unspoken tension. Daniel's first instinct was to close the door, to shut out whatever storm this stranger was bringing into his life. But something in her eyes, a mix of pain and urgency, stopped him. Against his better judgment, he stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. They sat in the living room, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Rachel clutched her phone tightly, her knuckles white, as if letting go would mean losing control. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This isn't easy to say, she began. But your wife, Lily, she's having an affair with my husband. The words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Daniel's mind raced, his thoughts colliding in a chaotic swirl of disbelief and denial. That's impossible, he stammered. Lily wouldn't, Rachel interrupted, her voice firmer now. I have proof. She unlocked her phone and handed it to him. On the screen was a video. It showed Lily sitting at a hotel bar, laughing and leaning intimately toward another man. The timestamp was recent. Daniel's hands trembled as he held the phone. The world around him seemed to blur, the edges of reality fraying as the truth began to sink in. I'm sorry, Rachel said softly. I found this by accident. My husband had been acting strange, so I checked his phone. That's when I discovered this. Daniel's voice caught in his throat. Why are you telling me this? Rachel's gaze hardened, a flicker of anger piercing through her sorrow. Because we deserve better than this. They've betrayed us both, and I thought you had a right to know. Before he could respond, the room was plunged into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator ceased, and the faint glow of the table lamp disappeared. A power outage. Rachel flinched, startled by the sudden shift. What? What just happened? She asked. Probably the circuit breaker, Daniel replied, his voice distant. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. As Daniel moved to check the breaker box, his thoughts churned. The darkness felt fitting, a physical manifestation of the chaos swirling within him. When he returned, the power was still out, and the atmosphere had shifted. The dim glow of his phone's flashlight and a single candle on the coffee table created an intimate setting, forcing them to confront the raw truth. How long have you known? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel sighed. A few weeks. I've been trying to figure out what to do. Confronting him didn't seem enough. I needed to, I don't know, make sense of it all. And then I thought of you. I thought you deserved to know. Daniel sank into the couch, the weight of her words pressing down on him. And now? What do we do now? Rachel looked at him, her expression resolute. We figure it out. Together. The hours that followed were a blur of revelations and shared pain. They pieced together the puzzle, recalling moments that now seemed glaringly obvious in hindsight. Late-night work calls, unexplained absences, guarded phones. Each detail added another layer to the betrayal, painting a picture that was both devastating and undeniable. As the night deepened, Rachel's phone buzzed with a message from her husband, Tom. "Where are you?" it read. She showed it to Daniel, her jaw tightening. "Let me see that," he said. He scanned the message, then met her gaze. "We need more than just this. If we're going to confront them, we need proof." The decision to act was unspoken but mutual. They began gathering evidence, their shared determination forging an unlikely alliance. Daniel scoured Lily's laptop while Rachel combed through Tom's social media. The more they found, the clearer the picture became. Receipts for hotel stays, overlapping work trips, and messages exchanged late at night. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin of their respective marriages. "Look at this," Rachel said, pointing to a receipt on her phone. "A hotel stay last weekend. He said he was at a conference." Daniel checked Lily's calendar. "And she had a work trip at the same time." They sat amidst the evidence, their anger and hurt giving way to a shared resolve. "What if we turn this around?" Rachel suggested. "Use their lies against them." Daniel's brow furrowed. "You mean get revenge?" Rachel nodded. "Not just revenge, justice." The first step in their plan was bold. They staged a photo together, making it look like they were in an intimate moment. The act felt surreal, their proximity filled with a mix of tension and purpose. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, her voice hesitant. Daniel's jaw set in determination. "If this is what it takes to make them face the truth, then yes." They sent the photo to their respective partners, the click of the send button echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. The screen faded to black as the notifications delivered, setting the stage for the confrontations to come. The next morning, Daniel woke to find a message from Lily. "We need to talk." Her tone was different. Not defensive, not angry, almost afraid. He stared at the screen, his emotions a tumultuous mix of anger, hurt, and anticipation. As he prepared for the inevitable confrontation, his mind raced. For years he had trusted her, loved her, built a life with her. Now every memory was tainted, every moment suspect. What happens next, he thought. What do you do when the foundation of your life crumbles beneath you? The door opened and Lily walked in, her expression guarded. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice tentative. He met her gaze, his own unwavering. "You're right. We do." The stillness in Daniel's house was deceptive. It masked the storm brewing inside, a tempest of betrayal, anger, and determination. As he stood in the living room, replaying Rachel's revelations in his mind, Lily's arrival signaled the beginning of the confrontation he had both dreaded and awaited. Lily's face was pale, her eyes darting nervously as she stepped through the door. She carried herself with a forced calmness, but Daniel could see through it. He could feel the weight of her guilt in the way she avoided his gaze. "Daniel," she began softly, "what's going on?" "You've been acting strange." Daniel's jaw tightened. The image of her with Tom, laughing, touching, flashed in his mind. He held up his phone, displaying the staged photo of himself and Rachel. "Funny," he said coldly. "I could ask you the same thing." Lily's eyes widened as the color drained from her face. She took a step back, her voice faltering. "What is this? Who is she?" "Her name is Rachel," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "She's the wife of the man you've been sneaking around with." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily's lips parted as if to deny it, but no words came. Instead, her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath. "Daniel, don't," he snapped, his voice cutting through her attempt at explanation. "Don't insult me with excuses. Just tell me the truth." Tears welled in her eyes, but Daniel felt no sympathy. The woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with was now a stranger who had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Lily finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. We were drifting apart, Daniel. You were always working, and I felt lonely." Her words stung, but Daniel refused to let her shift the blame. "So your solution was to cheat? To destroy our marriage?" he demanded. "You didn't even have the decency to talk to me about how you felt." Lily's tears fell freely now. "I'm sorry, I know I've hurt you, but it wasn't just physical. I felt seen by him. Loved." Daniel's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Loved? You think that's love? Sneaking around, lying, betraying the person who stood by you for years? That's not love, Lily. That's selfishness." The confrontation stretched on, every word a dagger to the heart.
Meanwhile, Rachel was facing her own battle. She had returned home to confront Tom, her husband, and the man who had shattered her world. Rachel stood in the doorway of her home, clutching the photo she and Daniel had staged. Tom sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm about to descend. "Tom," Rachel said, her voice cold and steady. "We need to talk." Tom looked up, his brow furrowing at her tone. "What's wrong?" Rachel threw the photo onto the coffee table, watching as his expression shifted from confusion to panic. "Care to explain this?" she demanded. Tom picked up the photo, his hands trembling. "Rachel, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, spare me," Rachel snapped. "I know everything, Tom. The late nights, the secret trips, the lies. You've been having an affair with Lily." Tom's face flushed and he stammered, I, it was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." Rachel's laughter was cold and sharp. "Didn't mean anything? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To our marriage?" Tom reached for her, but Rachel stepped back, her voice rising. Don't you dare try to touch me after what you've done." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with anger and betrayal. Tom tried to defend himself, to justify his actions, but Rachel refused to let him off the hook. "You've destroyed us, Tom," she said, her voice breaking. "And for what? A fling? Some cheap thrill?" Tom's silence was answer enough. Rachel turned away, her heart heavy but resolute. She had made her decision. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances. As the days passed, Daniel and Rachel continued to work together, their shared pain forging a bond between them. They began to craft a plan, not just for revenge, but for justice. Daniel met with a lawyer, presenting the evidence they had gathered. The lawyer, a sharp and determined woman named Claire, assured him that their case was strong. "With this evidence," Claire said, "we can push for a favorable settlement. You have grounds for divorce and can claim significant damages." Daniel nodded, his resolve hardening. "Do it. I want this over with." Meanwhile, Rachel confronted Tom with divorce papers. His protest fell on deaf ears. "You made your choice, Tom," she said firmly. "Now I'm making mine." The legal battles began, each confrontation in the courtroom a new chapter in their fight for justice. Daniel and Rachel's alliance deepened, their shared experiences and determination driving them forward. But beneath their resolve lay a simmering tension, an unspoken connection that neither of them could ignore. As they navigated the complexities of their legal battles and personal lives, they found themselves drawn to each other in ways they hadn't expected. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Daniel and Rachel found themselves alone in his living room. The power was out again, casting the room in shadows. A single candle flickered on the coffee table, its light dancing across their faces. "We've come a long way," Rachel said softly, her gaze meeting Daniel's. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, we have." The silence that followed was charged, the air between them thick with unspoken emotions. As they sat there side by side, the lines between ally and companion began to blur. "Rachel," Daniel began, his voice hesitant, "I don't know what's next, but I'm glad I'm not facing it alone." She smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through the pain that had defined their relationship so far. "Me too, Daniel. Me too." The candle's flame flickered, casting their shadows onto the wall. In that moment, amidst the chaos of their unraveling lives, they found a semblance of solace, a fragile yet undeniable connection that hinted at the possibility of something more. The stage was set for the final act, where truths would be laid bare, justice would be sought, and the fragile bonds they had forged would be tested to their limits. The courtroom was silent, save for the distant hum of the air conditioning. Daniel sat at the plaintiff's table, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Across the room, Lily and her attorney whispered in hurried tones, her face pale and tight with anxiety. Rachel sat quietly in the back row, a calm yet resolute presence, offering Daniel silent support. This was it, the culmination of months of pain, betrayal, and strategy. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, shuffled the papers in front of her. "We will begin with the evidence submitted by the plaintiff," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Daniel's lawyer rose, a confident man with a meticulous demeanor. "Your Honor, we have presented irrefutable evidence of infidelity. Here are documented hotel stays, text messages, and video footage corroborating the affair between the defendant, Lily Green, and Tom Evans." The evidence flashed on a screen, timestamps, photos, and receipts. The courtroom murmured as each piece of evidence was displayed, a collective gasp rippling through the audience when the video appeared. It showed Lily and Tom in an unmistakably intimate moment, their actions sealing the case against them. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her lawyer stood to counter. Your Honor, while the evidence may appear damning, we argue that this is a deeply personal matter and does not warrant the harsh penalties the plaintiff is seeking. This marriage had its flaws long before this alleged affair. Daniel's lawyer didn't miss a beat. Flaws, perhaps, but betrayal of this magnitude is a deliberate act, not a flaw. It's a violation of trust, one that has caused my client immense emotional and financial harm. As the arguments volleyed back and forth, Daniel's mind wandered to the events that had brought him here. He thought of Rachel, of the night they had uncovered the truth, and the unlikely partnership they had formed. She had been his anchor through the storm, her pain mirroring his own. Together, they had turned their anguish into action. The morning after they sent the stage photo, Daniel and Rachel had met their respective partners. Lily's face was a mixture of shock and anger as she confronted Daniel in their living room. What the hell is this? She demanded, waving her phone with the incriminating photo. How could you do this to me? Daniel's voice was calm but steely. How could I? Lily, how could you? That photo is nothing compared to what you've done. Her eyes widened. What are you talking about? He held up his phone, the video evidence playing in an endless loop. This, Lily, this is what I'm talking about. The color drained from her face. For a moment she was silent, her mind scrambling for an explanation. It's not what it looks like, she said weakly. Stop lying. Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. I've spent years loving you, trusting you, building a life with you. And this is how you repay me? Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, Daniel replied, his voice softer now, but no less resolute. And now you have to face the consequences. The judge's gavel brought Daniel back to the present. Mr. Green, would you like to address the court? She asked. Daniel stood, his legs feeling like lead. He glanced at Lily, her once familiar face now a stranger's. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, this isn't just about an affair. It's about the betrayal of trust, the erosion of a partnership that was supposed to last a lifetime. Lily's actions didn't just hurt me, they dismantled everything we built together. I'm here today to reclaim my dignity, to find closure, and to ensure that the truth is acknowledged. He sat down, his chest heaving with the weight of his words. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable. Thank you, Mr. Green. We will now hear from the defendant. Lily rose, her hands trembling. Your Honor, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I'm not a bad person. I've loved Daniel, and I never wanted to hurt him. What happened was, it was a lapse in judgment. I ask for leniency, not just for me, but for the years we shared together. Her words hung in the air, met with a silence that was more damning than any argument. The judge finally spoke. The court will take a short recess before delivering its verdict. When the judge returned, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. After reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides, she began, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Daniel Green. The divorce settlement will reflect the damages incurred by Mr. Green due to Mrs. Green's actions. Furthermore, the court recommends counseling for all parties involved to address the emotional ramifications of these events. The gavel struck, signaling the end of the trial. Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him, mingled with a profound sadness. It was over, but the scars would remain. Weeks later, Daniel found himself sitting on a park bench, watching the world go by. Rachel joined him, a coffee in hand. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice gentle. He shrugged. Some days are better than others, but I'm getting there. She nodded, her gaze distant. Me too. They sat in companionable silence, the weight of their shared experiences binding them together in an unspoken understanding. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. You know, despite everything, I'm glad I knocked on your door that day. Daniel smiled faintly. Me too. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. Life would go on. It wouldn't be the same, but maybe, just maybe, it could be better. Months later, Daniel stood in his new apartment, unpacking boxes. He picked up the wedding photo he'd taken from the mantelpiece and stared at it for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he placed it in a box labeled Past. The doorbell rang. It was Rachel, holding a bottle of wine. Thought you could use some company, she said with a smile. He stepped aside, letting her in. As they clinked glasses, laughter filling the room, Daniel realized something. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also led him to rediscover his strength, to find new connections. and to start over. And for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace.